As you can see, the title is quite controversial. The Muslims are going to be upset. Let me tell you what I'm not saying. I am not saying that Muslims knowingly worship the false god Baal. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, you'll note that the main competitor for the worship and allegiance of the Israelites was the false god Baal. All throughout the Old Testament, you'll find God chastening, disciplining, rebuking, punishing, even exiling his people for their habitual habit of turning to the false god Baal. The name Baal also pops out in the New Testament under the name Beelzebub. If you read Mark 3, for instance, 22 all the way 30, the Jews accused Jesus of casting out demons by Beelzebub, the prince of demons. The word Baal means Lord, husband, or master. This was the main chief competitor that Satan used to get the Israelites to forsake God, their love for God, a devotion to God, and worship this false god. In fact, Baal is simply Satan's disguise. Because if you go with what the Jews said, Mark 3, 22 to 30, Beelzebub is the prince of demons. But the prince of demons would be Satan. So here, if the Jews are right and Jesus didn't correct them, that means Beelzebub, Baal, is simply another name of Satan. Because there's only one ruler of demons, Satan. He rules the kingdom of darkness. All evil spirits are subject to him. So if Beelzebub is the ruler of demons, then that means that's another name for Satan, because Satan has various names. Satan, the devil, Belial, Beliar, the serpent, the dragon. These are his names. So that means Baal is simply Satan appearing as a god in order to mislead people from worshiping the true God. Now, if that's true, Allah is simply another name for Baal, and Islam is simply another form of Baal worship, then that actually further confirms Islam is the religion of the devil. It's Satan's religion that Satan inspired through Muhammad to be the competitor against Judeo-Christianity. And that would make sense, right? Because all throughout Old Testament history, the chief competitor to Yahweh, Yahovah, was Baal. Right now, as we speak, the chief competitor, the chief religion competing for the devotion of the hearts and minds of not just the world, but of Jews and Christians, is Islam. So it's like history repeating itself. As Solomon said in the book of Ecclesiastes, nothing new under the sun, the same lie, the same deceit, the same trickery being promoted throughout the ages, but under different disguises, repackaged. It's the same deceit, but repackaged. That doesn't mean Muslims know they're worshiping Baal. That's the deception. That's the deceit. Just like when the Israelites worshiped Baal, they didn't think they were worshiping Satan. They still were worshiping demons nonetheless. Deuteronomy 32, verses 16 to 17. Talking about the Israelites, they provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations, provoked him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers fear not. Did you catch it? The Israelites were sacrificing to devils, to demons, though that's not what they thought they were doing. Similarly, Muslims don't think they're worshiping Baal. They think they're worshiping the true God of Abraham, and that's the deceit of Satan. Satan doesn't care whether you know you're worshiping him or not. In fact, he doesn't care whether you acknowledge he exists or not. He doesn't even care if you're an atheist. He just doesn't want you to know the true God and the true gospel, because that's the only way you can escape him and overcome him. Fact number one, Hubal was the chief deity, the chief god of Mecca and of the shrine, the Kaaba. That's the first fact. Fact number two, Hubal was actually Baal. Hubal, and the Muslim sources will testify, was actually the Arabic name for Baal. Some people believe Hubal either comes from Hubal, he is Baal, two Arabic words, or it is an Arabicized corruption of the Hebrew words Ha-Baal, the Baal. The third fact, the sources don't come out and say it, but that's the logical, necessary inference. Hubal was Allah, Allah was Hubal. If you actually read, quote unquote, between the lines, you're going to see Hubal was Allah, Allah was Hubal. So are you now ready to dig in? I want to give you a little background on the pagan religion in Mecca. Medina, that's Arabia. Mecca, according to the Muslim sources, is the place where Muhammad was born. The Quraysh tribe, which was an Arab tribe that lived in Mecca. And according to the Muslim sources, I'm quoting the late Abdullah Yusuf Ali in his translation of the Quran. He admits that the Arabs before Muhammad and during the time Muhammad were into astral worship, where they worshiped the sun and moon and 5 planets because they thought there were only 5 planets. Now let's do the math. Sun, moon, 5 planets, that's 7, right? Now, in many cultures, the sun was the male deity and the moon was the female consort, the female deity. Not in Arabia. In Arabia, the moon was the male deity and the sun was the female deity. And the sun was the consort, the wife of the moon. Let me read what he says. This is a Muslim. Now, he's passed away, but he admits this. To revert to the worship of the heavenly bodies, okay? A few individual stars did attract the worshippers' attention. So the Arabs worship Sirius, the dog star, the brightest fixed star in the heavens with a blush tinge in its light. It is probably Sirius that is referred to as the fixed star in the parable of Abraham. With regard to the fixed stars and their myriads, the astronomers turned their fancy to devising groups or constellations. Now, here's where it's going to get relevant, okay? But the moving stars are planets, each with a motion and therefore will or influence of its own, right? As they knew and understood them, they were 7 in number. That's what they thought, 7. And now he tells you what the 7 are. Viz, 1 and 2, the moon and the sun. So count. The 2 objects which most closely and indubitably influence the tides, the temperatures, and the life in our planet. 3 and 4, the 2 inner planets, Mercury and Venus. So that's 4 so far, which are morning and evening stars and never travel far from the sun. 5, 6, and 7, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the outer planets whose elongation from the sun on the ecliptic can be as wide as possible. The number 7 itself is a mystical number, as explained in note 5526. Okay, now, notice what he's going to say. It will be noticed that the sun and the moon and the 5 planets got identified, associated with, each with a living deity, god or goddess, with characteristics and qualities of its own. Now, before I read the rest of the part, did you catch what he just said? This is a Muslim whose Quran translation was widely circulated and distributed in the 20th century. The Arabs in Mecca, in Arabia, but in Mecca, worship the sun and moon and 5 planets as 7 gods and goddesses. You're going to see the relevance in a minute. And I hope I don't put you to sleep here. The Arabic word for the moon, qamar, is of the masculine gender. And on the other hand, the Arabic word for the sun, shams, is of the feminine gender. The pagan Arabs evidently looked upon the sun as a goddess and the moon as a god. So the Arabs in Mecca, they viewed the moon as the male god and the sun as the female god, or the goddess. That's going to be important. Okay, folks, let me bring out the implication. The sources teach that the Kaaba in Mecca in Saudi Arabia was a shrine that housed 360 idols. This is in the Muslim sources. It's not non-Muslim sources. The Muslim sources also admit the pagans before Muhammad would perform what they call the rites of pilgrimage, Hajj and Umrah, meaning they would come to the Kaaba, and those who lived there didn't need to travel, and the pagans would run around it 7 times. 7 times. Something Muslims do to this day. Muslims adopted these practices from the pagans. And then there are 2 hills in Mecca called Safa and Marwa. And they'd run between these hills 7 times. 7 times. And the Muslim sources say that at one time there were 2 idols on both hills. There was an idol here and an idol there, and they'd run 7 times. Now, folks, can I ask you a question? Why did the pagans run 7 times between the 2 hills, Safa and Marwa, and run around the Kaaba 7 times? Practices which Islam adopted, Muhammad observed, and Muslims continue to this day. But why did the pagans do it? They did it in worship of the gods and goddesses, the 7 planetary deities. Thank you. So, folks, why in the world did Muhammad continue that practice? And why are Muslims running around the Kaaba 7 times and between the 2 hills 7 times, all of which even the Muslim sources admit were practices that the pagans observed because they believed in the sun and moon and 5 planets as god and goddesses that they had to worship and venerate? Why are the Muslims still doing it? Do you want to hear what their silly excuse is? Because Ishmael settled in Mecca, and Abraham came and visited Ishmael, and Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba as the first house of worship. And so Ishmael taught them these practices, but as time went on, his descendants corrupted these practices and then attached them to gods and goddesses. So originally it was practices done for Yehovah, the worship of Jehovah. But then the descendants of Ishmael corrupted themselves, became idolaters, and then corrupted the practices and attached them to their gods and goddesses. Are you buying that version of history? And is it a coincidence that Ishmael told them, hey, run between the 2 hills 7 times, run around the Kaaba 7 times, and somehow, magically, 7 becomes the number of the gods and goddesses that the pagans worship because they thought there were 5 planets in the sun and the moon. Gee, what a coincidence. Let alone all the historical archaeological evidence refutes the claim that Ishmael went to Mecca. Because if you believe in your Bible, Genesis 21:21, it says Ishmael settled in the wilderness of Paran, and Paran is around Egypt and Canaan. It's not in Mecca. And Genesis 21:21 says that Ishmael married an Egyptian because his mother Hagar was from Egypt, and she got him a wife from Egypt. So he never settled in Mecca, and he didn't marry an Arab woman and sired the Arabs in Mecca. This much the Muslims admit. Now, folks, let me add another thing as we get into the evidence. You remember what the source just stated? I just read Abdullah Yusuf Ali. He said to the Arabs, the moon, the Arabic word qamar, is masculine, denoting the fact that the Arabs viewed the moon as the male deity. meaning it was the planet, the astral object associated with the chief deity. And remember, the Arabs are what they call patriarchal society, meaning the male is the chief. So their god has to be male. He's the chief. The moon is the planet representing the chief male deity of their pantheon. You with me there? The sun is the female. The sun represents the female, the goddess, that's the wife of the male deity. Follow with me. The chief deity is supposed to be Allah. He's the chief deity. He's the male deity. Well, if the moon was viewed as masculine, Qamar, and it's the male deity or the planet or the object associated with the male deity, that means you just established that for the pagans, Allah was the moon god. Oh my goodness. If we take what the sources say, remember, I said sometimes the sources will just come out and say something black and white. Other times they don't say it, but it's the necessary logical conclusion and inference from what they are saying. Allah was the name of Hubal. Hubal is the moon god, and Hubal is actually the idol Baal. And I'm now going to show it to you. Let's begin. Point number one, Hubal, Mecca's chief deity. The chief god of Mecca, the god of the Kaaba, the god of that shrine, the Lord of that shrine in Mecca. The chief god of the pagans in Mecca was Hubal. Okay, this comes from Gods, Goddesses, and Mythology, volume 11, page 137. Hubal, chief god of the Kaaba, a martial and auricular deity, a moon god. What was Hubal? A moon god. Who was the chief god of Mecca, of the Kaaba, of the shrine? Hubal. This comes from Cyril Glasse, and this comes from the New Encyclopedia of Islam, page 209. Hubal, an idol, the god of the moon. Centuries before Islam, Amr ibn Luhay, a chief of the tribe of Jurhum who dwelt in Mecca, before the coming of the Quraysh tribe, brought the idol to the city from Syria. Wow. It was set up in the Kaaba and became the principal idol of the pagan Meccans. Folks, do you understand the implication of what we just read? Hubal was an idol from Syria. An Arab named Amr ibn Luhay brought the idol from Syria to Mecca, and Hubal became the chief god of Mecca. The chief god in Syria among the pagans was Baal. Baal was the god that was worshipped by the Syrians before the time of Muhammad. If this Arab, Amr, brought the idol from Syria, what was he bringing to the Kaaba? The idol of Baal, before Muhammad. So he brought the idol Baal from Syria, and that's why it's called Hubal. And notice Hubal became the chief god of the Kaaba of Mecca. So you understand what the sources just admit? Hubal is the god of the moon. He's the moon god. Hubal was the god of the Kaaba, the god of Mecca, the chief god. Hubal was the idol from Syria. These three facts are admitted explicitly by the sources. So now let's break it down. If Hubal is from Syria and the chief god worshipped in Syria is Baal, we just established Hubal is Baal. That means Baal was the chief god of Mecca, the chief god of the Kaaba, and Baal was then seen to be the moon god, the god of the moon. But there's more. Hubal was pulled down and used as a doorstep when the Prophet conquered Mecca and purified the Kaaba. Okay, let's look at some other sources. Are you ready? Again, this is Encyclopedia of Islam, and it says Hubal, a pre-Islamic deity represented by an idol in Kaaba that was destroyed by Muhammad when he conquered Mecca in 630. Patron of the Quraysh. Remember, Muhammad's tribe is the Quraysh tribe. Muhammad's tribe is the Quraysh tribe. What does patron of the Quraysh mean? It means the chief god of this tribe. That was their patron god. That was their chief god. So who was the chief god of the Quraysh? Hubal. What tribe was Muhammad born? Quraysh. So who was the chief god of Muhammad's family, of Muhammad's tribe, of Muhammad? Hubal. Who is Hubal? Baal. Muhammad was born in Baal worship, Baal. And this is Encyclopedia of Islam saying it. Did you understand what you just read? Encyclopedia of Islam. The chief god of the Quraysh was Hubal. Hubal was the god of the moon, an idol brought from Syria. Muhammad's tribe is Quraysh. He was born into the Quraysh tribe. That means Muhammad was born in a family that worshiped Baal. And by the way, these articles, these sources have been there for over 10 years, over 15 years on our Answering Islam website. AnsweringIslam.net. I wrote this material years ago. I just compiled it together for today's session. But all this information was there for you guys if you just went to the site and read them for the glory of Jesus. Bill Shepard, answer your question. It's like the word Elohim. Bill Shepard, I'm going to let you answer the question. Elohim is not the proper name of God because Elohim is a generic noun meaning God. Anyone can use the word Elohim for the God they worship, right? Bill Shepard, right? That's why in Judges 16:23, Dagon, the god of the Philistines, is called their Elohim. Judges 16:23-24, it says Dagon, their Elohim. So Elohim is used for the false god Dagon. So Elohim is not the proper name of God. It's a generic noun, meaning God, that you can use for the particular God you worship, right? Allah is the name used to refer to the supreme God. So Allah is not a proper name per se. It becomes a proper name in Islam. But Allah is simply the name that someone would use to refer to their God. So now, do the math. Add 1 + 1 and come up with 2. If Allah is not the proper name, but it's the name that you use to refer to the supreme God, and Hubal is a supreme God, then simply put, Hubal was Allah. The Allah of the pagans, his proper name was Hubal. So when you ask the pagans, who is the Allah you worship? Hubal. Hubal Allah. Like if you ask the Philistines, who's the Elohim you worship? Dagon Elohim. Are you catching it now? Now Islam takes Allah and makes it a proper name. Who's not getting this? Is it making sense? Is it making sense? Okay. Text me, folks, because I can't read the comment section. Text me. When I say folks, first, last, you know what I mean, and Protestant, if I start buffering, because I got to read some more. Let me read some more. It's all in the article. Okay, let me read some more sources. The Cambridge Companion to the Quran, page 24. Pay attention to this. The Cambridge Companion to the Quran, page 24. The Sirah literature presents Mecca's cult, the cult of Mecca, the religion of Mecca, as a pagan one to the god Hubal, and depicts the Arabian religious environment in which Muhammad grew up as overwhelmingly pagan. Wait. So the Meccans were devoted to the god Hubal? So the chief god of the Meccans and the Kaaba is Hubal? There you go. How many more sources do I need to quote? Well, let me quote a couple more. Mahmoud M. Ayub, a Muslim. This is a Muslim, page 15. Mahmoud M. Ayub, Islam, Faith and History. Among the many deities that Arabs worshipped in and around the Kaaba were the god Hubal and the 3 goddesses Alad, Al-Uzza, Manat. Hubal was originally a moon god and perhaps also a rain god, as Hubal means vapor. And guess what? Baal was also the god of fertility, the god of rain. Did you know that? Baal was the god of fertility, the god of rain, the god of thunder. And this is a Muslim who just admit this. Hubal was originally a moon god and perhaps also a rain god. Wow. Guys, don't get distracted by side discussions. Here's another one. Mark Deling, a convert to Islam, a Muslim who died, and he wrote a biography on Muhammad's life, called Muhammad is Life based on the earliest sources, page 5. Watch here. Khuza'a thus shared the guilt of Jurhum. They're also to blame in other respects. Now, here's what's beautiful. A chieftain of theirs, on his way back from a journey to Syria, coming back from Syria, asked the Moabites, oh my goodness, the Moabites, to give him one of their idols. They gave him Hubal, which he brought back to the sanctuary, setting it up within the Kaaba, and it became the chief idol of Mecca. Who gave him the idol? The Moabites. Who are the Moabites? The descendants of Lot. The Moabites in Syria, whom the Old Testament says worship Baal. He had asked the Moabites to give him one of their idols. They gave him Hubal, which he brought to the sanctuary, setting it up within the Kaaba itself, and it became the chief idol of Mecca. And this is a Muslim admitting this, admitting these facts. Are you guys getting blown away here? Hubal is the idol of the Moabites in Syria. The idol of the Moabites, Hubal, was brought to the Kaaba, and he became the chief god of the Kaaba, the chief god of Mecca. Folks, you're reading it for yourselves. What more evidence do you need that the pagan Arabs were Baal worshippers? They worship Baal. They worship Baal. Baal was their chief god, the god of the Kaaba. But the Muslims tell me the Kaaba was built for Allah. Wait, if the Kaaba is Baal's shrine and the Kaaba is Allah's shrine, and you can't have more than one god of the shrine, that means Baal is Allah, Allah is Baal. You guys blown away? The triune God is awesome, Bill Shepherd. That's why bathe me in prayer. Ask Jesus to keep filling me with wisdom, knowledge, boldness, passion, destroy my fears and doubts, unbelief, make me holy and in love with him, in love with Jesus, and to continue this work until the Lord calls me home. And you know what?